Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Dana Trupiana, and I cover infamous gangsters every week in a true crime-like format. My show, Mob Times, comes out every Tuesday, so if you're seeing this and it's new, it's a Tuesday. I am not feeling the hottest this week, and I've got some frizzy hair, so we have a hood up and we're leaving it that way because I'm not breaking my hair every 2 seconds trying to fix it. So if there's some frizz and there's a hood, we are just gonna push through because I'm making this video instead of just skipping it when I feel like dog doo-doo. So I've got a lot of new followers from Tommy Stiggs. He mentioned me on his live and I got a flood of comments and followers. So thanks so much to Tommy Stiggs. And we're gonna be doing a new show. I'm sure by now, by the time this episode comes out, we've already done a live. So if you're a follower of my channel, make sure you tune in on Monday nights because me and Tommy Stiggs will be going live together. And I'm really excited for that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think it's a really good opportunity to cross our followers. When my name was mentioned on his live, I was fully convinced this dude had like 1 million followers because I had a flood of comments and I'm like, okay, he must have a bajillion followers. He has a very low follower count, and that's really surprising. But I tend to lean in the same direction. I would rather have a small but very loyal and very active audience than have millions of followers and have them just unfollow me if I skip a week here and there or something like that. So if you're a follower of mine and you've been around a while, just know that I really appreciate you and I'm really excited for this new chapter in this channel. I've always wanted to do some kind of collab and work with another content producer, so this is really exciting for me. So today we're going to go ahead and continue going with Carlo Gambino. I put the second episode out last week. And we're just going to keep trucking along. I'm going to stop trying to estimate how many parts there's going to be. I keep saying like, oh, this is going to be the last part. There's only going to be X amount. I'm going to try to get through as much as I can today. I might have another episode on this. I'm going to try to get through it, but I kind of doubt I'm going to be able to. So I don't know. We'll see. I do want to get through because I want to record Stefano Magaddino. I have an episode about Stefano Magaddino, but I don't know what was going on in my life that week. I don't know if I was like trying a new makeup palette or what, but I looked like a whole clown in that episode. And I just can't bring myself to leave it up, so I took it down. I have one person that's writing a screenplay on Stefano Magaddino, so I'm giving him permission to view it, but overall, it's getting taken down, and I'm gonna re-record it next week. So I really want to get that done, especially for the follower that's writing a screenplay and using my content as a source to get information from, but really just to kind of pump that out and not have me looking like a whole clown with pink, I don't even know, on my eyes. I am embarrassed that that exists in the first place. So just to do a quick little recap of last week's episode, we were covering Carlo Gambino and his rise through the ranks. We went through how he became a member of the family that was run by Vincent Mangano, and then when Albert Anastasia decided that he was going to have both Mangano brothers killed, Anastasia took over as boss of the family and Gambino rose to number 2 as underboss. Now, eventually, Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino, they get together and they make a plan together that they're gonna take over as bosses of their respective families. They go after Frank Costello, and after a really close call and a bullet to a hat and the ear, Costello handed over control of the family to Genovese, because he was just like, I cannot be bothered. If you want this so bad, take it. In his new title as boss of the family, Genovese stuck to his word, and he helped Gambino rise to the same rank. He wanted Gambino as the boss of his family, he stuck to his word, and he helped. And if we're being 100% honest, that's most likely just because he wanted another vote on the commission. It's not like he was doing it out of the goodness of his heart. He just thought that Gambino would be somebody that he could control, so he was trying to help him become the boss because he knew he would always be going up against Albert Anastasia, not only because they always hated each other, but because he went after Frank Costello, and Frank Costello was one of Anastasia's boys, so he knew they would always have beef. They would always clash heads. So he looks at it like, I would way rather have Gambino there, who's gonna agree with me on stuff because I helped him become boss of the family. Together, the team took out Albert Anastasia at the same location that Genovese facilitated the death of another big-time gangster, Arnold Rothstein, at the Park Sheraton Hotel in New York City, and they took out Anastasia in 1957. And that right there is the reason that I hate Genovese with a burning fiery passion, because of that and because of how much he helped Mussolini. But it's definitely the reason that I've always had a thing against Gambino. Guys, it's kind of funny because, like, ironically, When I'm Sick is probably the first time and probably the only time you guys will ever hear my actual voice. Like, this is what I actually sound like. You just don't know that because I always sound like I have a clothespin on my nose because I have tumors in my nose. But because I'm sick, I'm taking so much medication that it actually cleared my nose up. And you guys get to hear my actual voice, which is really cool. So soak it in because you'll probably never hear it again. I wish I could say that I'm gonna get the tumor under control, but I'm just not. So we live and we learn and we push on through. So now it's 1957 and Vito Genovese is the boss of his family and Carlo Gambino is the boss of his family. They've worked together, they made this plan work, and the fruits of their labor have paid off. They officially took over 2 of the 5 New York City families. Now, following the death of Anastasia, Carlo Gambino steps up as the new boss of the family, and he appoints his new underboss as Joseph Biondo. Now, because of all the changes and the switch-ups in the underworld, Vito Genovese is insisting on a mafia conclave, which would come to be known later as the Apalachin Meeting. So let's go through that now. The Apalachin Meeting was held at the home of Joseph Barbera at 625 McFall Road in Apalachin, New York on November 14th, 1957. Now, Genovese knew that this meeting was a terrible idea when he scheduled it, but he was being prompted by the boss of upstate New York, the person that we're going to be covering next week, Stefano Magaddino, to hold it up there. So who cares if a lot of different people are saying that this is a bad idea? Yeah, Sam Giancana, fuck that dude. Like, he doesn't know anything. Barbera is saying that he's having a hard time handling the cops and getting them in line to not arrest him and his boys. And he's a little sketched out about holding it in his area himself. But fuck him too, what does he know? Shit is going down right now, okay? I just off the boss of my family. I am the new boss of the family, and that hasn't officially been cemented yet. I just offed a second boss and made my boy the boss of that family, and that hasn't been cemented yet either. This can't stand. We 100% need to have this meeting so that everybody in the mafia knows that I am the most important person ever, okay? At this time, there's also a shit ton of people that are coming after Genovese. The entire mafia is about to break out into a war because of this dumb shit. He is muscling into territories, he's killing bosses left and right. He's just doing whatever the hell he wants to do, just like Vito Genovese always does. And there's people out there that are openly saying they want a war. They want to go to war. Neil Dellacroce and Armand Rava, they want all that smoke. If they don't have this meeting, they're gonna get it. And Vito Genovese doesn't want to go to war. He just wants everybody to bow down at his feet because he's now the most important person in the mafia. Duh. Forget the fact that there's currently a mafia meeting going down right now at the Hotel des Palms in Italy. But that's members of the Bonanno family, so who really cares about them? There's mafiosi from New York, Detroit, Buffalo, Montreal, but those are all people in the Bonanno family. So yeah, it's a mafia meeting, but it's not my mafia meeting. And I want this meeting to be about me because I matter and I'm important. The fact that that meeting over in Hotel des Palms is all over the newspapers doesn't really matter. Yeah, we all know it's not the best time to plan a meeting after we just whacked a boss in a New York City barbershop and tried to whack another at their apartment. I don't care. I'm Vito Genovese. I do what I want, and I don't care what anybody has to say about it. So the meeting is scheduled, and all the most powerful mafiosi from around the world descend on this sleepy little town in upstate New York. Now, the narrative that the police set up is that They were diligently watching the streets, and they noticed that there was a lot of really foreign cars that were expensive, and they were driving around this town, and not a lot of cars like that are usually in this town, so they thought something was weird, and they set up a roadblock, and they arrested everybody. But it's absolute bullshit. We all know that cops had wiretaps on all of these guys. They had recording devices in all of the gangsters' hangouts, their houses, their businesses, their cars, everywhere. They had informants that were telling them that this meeting was going to happen. So no, there wasn't some diligent cop that had a gut feeling and got this all together. They just needed to use that as a cover so that all of the mafiosi wouldn't be like, oh, hey, how the hell did they know that this was coming? Maybe I should check my office for bugs. And let's not forget, a lot of those wiretaps are illegal. One of the FBI's favorite little games to play back then was to place illegal wires, and then they would just listen to it and find out whatever was happening. And yeah, they couldn't use it in court, but they could find out what was coming up and use that stuff in court. And then when they had enough, or when they got caught having illegal listening devices, that was fine too, because they would just release it to the media. The FBI has always played dirty little games like that, so that's just one of those things in life that you have to accept. So anyway, regardless of how they got this information, they ended up setting up roadblocks, and they busted into this meeting, and they arrested a bunch of people there, and everybody scurried. And they set up a roadblock so that anybody that went and got into their car was arrested down the road. They also had cops chasing gangsters everywhere. It was like one of those 1950s movies that you just see pandemonium break out. Now, interestingly enough, Google will tell you that Gambino was not arrested at the Apalachin Meeting, which is super weird because he was. Newspaper articles that were released days after the Apalachin Meeting list Gambino as a person that was arrested at the meeting. Honestly, I have no idea why it's listed that he wasn't arrested there. When I first started researching this, I thought that he wasn't arrested there, because why else would Google say that? I thought that maybe he was arrested afterwards because they knew he was there, but he was one of the guys that got away. But no, he was arrested at the Apalachin Meeting. Overall, there was about 110 guys that were at that meeting. Half of them got away, half of them got caught, and that's just the way that it worked out. 60 men were arrested. They estimate that about 50 of them got away. But reading the newspaper the next day was like reading the who's who of the mafia. Every single important mafioso on the planet was at this meeting in Apalachin, New York. After the Apalachin Meeting, Gambino is about to go into a significant legal battle with a deportation order. He had been found guilty of crimes stemming from the Apalachin Meeting, but he would get off on that shortly after this, just like every other person that was arrested, found guilty, and had their verdict overturned. But with the deportation order and the criminal charges for the meeting, shit is just not going Gambino's way right now. Put that next to the fact that this man is about to go to war with the people that he stood next to and worked alongside to create the mafia that he's now a member of. By teaming up with Genovese and getting rid of Anastasia and Costello, he started an all-out war with Luciano, Lansky, Costello, Bugsy, all of them. Actually, not Bugsy. Bugsy's dead already. But all of them. And these were his boys. These were his best friends. So, not great. Gambino didn't think so either. And this is where Gambino does a tiny, tiny bit to redeem himself. Just a tiny bit. He's still a scumbag for working to get rid of Anastasia, but he does redeem himself a tiny little bit when he turns around behind Genovese's back and works with Luciano and all of them to get rid of Genovese. More than likely, what happened is that Luciano and all of them, they went to Gambino and said, hey, we're taking you guys out. Like, you're dead. You are a dead man. But if you work together with us to get rid of Genovese, we might consider letting you live. And Gambino was like, hell motherfucking yes. I know how important you guys are, how powerful you guys are. I don't want to go to war with you because I know I'll die. So he took the olive branch that these guys had extended to him, and this new alliance puts together a plan to get rid of Vito Genovese. Now, Luciano had long since been telling everybody to stop dealing drugs because the government was handing out longer punishments for dealing drugs than murder. Genovese told him to go fuck himself. He had his own newly minted family. He's the boss, and he does what he wants, when he wants, how he wants, and nobody can tell him anything. And there is way too much money in dealing heroin to just pass that up. In 1959, Genovese went to Atlanta to meet a huge shipment of heroin that was coming in for him to have his people deal. But he was arrested and sentenced to 15 years in jail when he got there. The Luciano team had set him up, paid off a gangster to testify against him and take him down, and pretty much just got him out of their hair, without having to get the publicity of whacking him. Though Genovese continued to lead the family from prison, he was a lot less powerful now. If he ever pissed them off, all they had to do was tip off a prison guard that something was going on, and they would take away his phone privileges, his visiting privileges. And honestly, nobody with a bedtime has any real say in the mafia. Yeah, you're the boss of the family, but you're a figurehead. You have the idea of power. And that's just the way they wanted it. They wanted him to have the idea of power, but not actually have much say in anything. Now, back on Gambino's side, he was arrested on November 25th, 1957, and ordered to be deported by 11/29, 1957. So he was ordered to be deported 4 days after he was arrested. Paperwork on the deportation order can be found on the FBI's Part 3, page 4. The report reads as follows. On November 29, 1957, Redacted Investigation Division, Immigration and Naturalization Services, INS, referred to the subject as one of the individuals who participated in the recent gathering of hoodlums in Apalachin, New York. Redacted advised on a confidential basis that INS plans to apprehend Gambino in Brooklyn, New York on Monday, December 2nd, 1957. He will be arrested on a deportation warrant, and INS plans to hold a hearing with the ultimate objective of deporting Gambino to his native country, Italy. Redacted is of the opinion that General Showing, with the collaboration of department officials, will give the apprehension as much publicity as possible. So in other words, what they're saying is they're going to make a big show of trying to deport him. Pretty much saying that they're going to make an example of him. By saying that they're going to give it as much publicity as possible, they're pretty much saying, like, we're going to tip off TMZ to be there when we arrest him because we want everybody to know not only that he's being deported, but that's what will happen to you if you're in organized crime. Be really, really scared of us. Now, I want to read an excerpt that I found on page 6 because I found it really enlightening and telling about their feelings. Page 6, from what I can read, because again, remember, a lot of these FBI documents are completely illegible. But what I can read reads as follows. Now, if you're watching the video, I'll have a picture of it and you could read along, but if you're listening, trust me, bro. It reads, Redacted at the INS, confidentially advised agent Redacted that INS personnel has been covering Gambino's residence in Pennsylvania with the assurance that he was home. On December 8, 1957, INS called the house, and a member of the family stated that Gambino was not home and his whereabouts were unknown. Redacted stated that Gambino might have slipped out of the house undetected by the INS investigators. INS is also considering the possibility that Gambino may still be hiding in the house. At this point, INS cannot walk into the residence without a search warrant. So pretty much what this is saying is that INS had said on the day of the Apalachin meeting that Gambino couldn't have been there because they were watching his property like a hawk and they would have known that he left to go to the Apalachin meeting. But on December 8th, they're under the impression that he's in the house. They call him, they want to talk to him, and he's not there. Nobody knows where he is. So they're like, all right, our bad. Maybe, just maybe, he's able to slip out without us knowing. Oops. Maybe not. Now, December 8th, they're trying to get him because they're trying to deport him. But on December 8th, 1957, page 7 of the FBI files says that Gambino had been, I don't know, it's really hard to read this page, but I'm assuming it said something along the lines of admitted to a New York City hospital. It says, He is severely ill from a heart condition and undergoing a serious operation. His chances of living are not good. It was later reported that he was at Flower Hospital, scheduled to undergo a very, very serious surgery related to his coronary artery disease. Now, while he's in the hospital, on December 9th, 1957, police went and they got a search warrant to search his house. They got this warrant by charging him with, I don't know, something. It probably is related to the deportation, honestly. Again, I can't read it. I can't read what prompted them to get this search warrant, but it says something about immigration, so I'm assuming it has to do with this deportation. They say that he was a stowaway of the SS Vincenzo Florio. He didn't come into the country legally, so they have the right to go in and search his house. So, lo and behold, Carlo Gambino lives through the surgery. He gets out and he goes to recover in Miami. He surrendered to immigration services for the deportation on September 16, 1958. It was reported on September 9th, 1958, that AUSA Stephen Kaufman had advised that he desired to defer rendering an opinion pending review of investigative reports on the matter of Gambino being deported. So now this is a whole year later. So Gambino surrendered to immigration services in connection with that deportation order on September 16th, 1958. So a whole year after the proceedings had first gotten started. It was reported on September 9th, 1958, that AUSA Stephen Kaufman advised that he wanted to defer rendering an opinion. And pretty much that just means that he doesn't want to make a decision either way. At this point, he's just being wishy-washy. The New York Daily News reported that Carlo Gambino, a labor consultant, surrendered to immigration services the day before, and that he had accepted service of a deportation order and had also posted a $10,000 bond so that he wouldn't have to sit in jail waiting to see what was going to happen at the trial. It was reported that the government had deferred action against Gambino because they really didn't want to mess with him too much because he had a heart condition. And they knew that if they continued to drive and keep going at him, it was possible his heart could give out. And they didn't want to do that. The report states that the charge against Gambino is that he had originally, way back in like 1921, he had come to the United States as a stowaway from Italy. So that is what he's being charged with. On this report, his original record with the income tax fraud that he had been found guilty of in the 40s, that is also listed here. On January 12th, 1959, AUSA William Lynch advised that he did not want to prosecute. Pretty much what he was saying was that he had conducted an investigation, and the investigation came up empty. He said that the investigation disclosed no violations of the federal anti-racketeering statutes, nor of the Labor Management Relations Act. So because they conducted an investigation, they weren't able to find anything, they overturned the ruling, and they allowed Gambino to stay in the United States. Now, it's at this point, right around the end of the Apalachin Meeting, that Gambino put an official freeze on the books. So that means that no new members were allowed to be made. There were no new made men as of 1957, and that rule held for a long time. A lot of people came in and they wanted to become made men, but they couldn't. As long as Gambino was there, he was going to fight against allowing any new made men to be made. Now, we could see on page 69 why the government kept letting Gambino walk. Because as you're reading, you're kind of looking at it like, this is a file named Top Hoodlums of New York. He's a criminal. The worst things about him are in this file, yet they continue to allow him to not testify, not be deported, and it just doesn't make sense why. But page 69 says the following. Now, this sentence is the end of a sentence that started on page 68, but I'm just going to read what's on page 69. So that's why it doesn't grammatically make sense. In Washington, desired deferment in order that a doctor's certificate might be secured certifying that Gambino's heart was in good enough shape to stand an arrest and hearing. Redacted stated INS had requested a certificate of medical fitness from the subject's current physician, Dr. Alfonso A. Lombardi, verifying Gambino could be served with a warrant of arrest without fatal consequences. However, Lombardi submitted a 2-page letter which outlined Gambino's medical condition, and while alleging that Gambino might be served the above, he could not guarantee that Gambino would not suffer heart failure as a result. Redacted stated that Washington INS headquarters is most anxious not to interfere with current favorable publicity received by the Attorney General's office and does not want a chance having Gambino expire while in INS custody, no matter how brief that period might be. So that's why they didn't force him out of the country. That's why they didn't force him to testify. There were doctors that were saying, like, yeah, you could do what you want. Like, you're the government. If you want to do something, do it. But no, I'm not going to say that he won't die when you do it because he's sick. It's entirely possible that he will die. And they were pretty much like, listen, if we take custody of Gambino and he dies, that's going to look really bad for us. And the public is really liking us right now. We just busted the Apalachin Meeting. We got 60 of the country's top mafiosi, and the public is loving us right now. But that's all going to change if we take custody of Carlo Gambino for an hour and he dies in that hour. So you know what? Just leave him where he is. Let him chill. And over and over and over again, this report says that he was going to die soon. So agents just continued to accept that. They continued to say, okay, he's going to die soon. It sucks that we have to deal with him for now, but we can deal with it until he dies. We're not taking that risk. We're not taking the risk that we arrest him for an hour and he dies and the public hates us. We have people protesting outside our offices. Absolutely not. We're good. So pretty much what they did was they just backed off and they took like a wait and see approach. Now, when Genovese went away, obviously there had to be an acting boss or like a street boss. There always has to be a boss on the streets that's not in prison. So the acting boss of the Genovese family was a man named Thomas Eboli. Eboli took over as the acting boss on April 17th, 1959, when Genovese was arrested and proceedings to get him locked up started. We already talked about how Luciano and all of them, they had Genovese set up. So now Genovese's in prison, and Eboli steps in and takes over the position of street boss while Genovese is the actual boss running it from prison. Now, Eboli had been a very, very powerful member of the Genovese family even before Genovese was arrested. And he was also very, very rich and a high-earning member of the family. He was big into the docks at the Hudson River, and he owned multiple companies. Mostly companies that sold cigarettes and jukeboxes, which is just like, what a stereotypical mafioso. So Eboli takes over as acting boss, and he appoints Gerardo Jerry Catania as the underboss, and he appoints Michelle Big Mike Miranda as the consigliere. Now, most sources will tell you that during the time that Genovese was in jail, there wasn't even one acting boss. There was a ruling panel of bosses ruling the family on the streets. And I'm pretty sure that there was a reference to this in The Sopranos. I remember them talking about how a panel had been ruling a family in New York, and I would assume they're talking about this situation. I can't be 100% sure, but when they said like, oh, there's a panel of a bunch of dudes running a family in New York, I think it was this situation that they were discussing. The panel was made up of Eboli, Catania, and Philip Lombardo, who's a very powerful capo in the family. But there's a lot of debate on who that third member was. Some people say it was Philip Lombardo. Some people say that it was Miranda himself that was the third member. There was 3 members of this ruling panel. On February 14th, 1969, Vito Genovese died in prison. Boo freaking hoo. We're all so sad that he died. Oh my god, what are we gonna do without Vito Genovese? I just want to say it's kind of funny that there's so many mafia tie-ins with St. Valentine's Day. Like, you got the St. Valentine's Day massacre from Al Capone, and Vito Genovese died on Valentine's Day in 1969. I wonder if there's a reason for that. I don't know. Now, at this point, it is now 10 years later. Genovese got arrested in April of 1959. We're now in February of 1969. So this ruling panel has been ruling the family for 10 years. And 10 years later, Eboli isn't really set up to take over as the official boss of the family. He has a lot of health issues, and he's under indictment at this time. So it's said that Miranda took over as the official boss of the family, but left Eboli in charge as pretty much the front man for the family. So now, according to most sources, the structure of the family is that Eboli is the front man, Miranda is the, official boss. I don't really know. But now that Genovese is dead and Eboli is in a more cemented role, he decides that he wants to take on a new business venture. He wants to start dealing heroin. So what does he do? He goes and gets a loan from Carlo Gambino to the tune of $4 million. And he uses this to start his new hustle. Now, we know that he could not have told Gambino that he was planning to use this money to start a drug ring. Gambino has always been staunchly against drug dealing. He thinks that it's going to make other people turn around and rat because of the long sentences being handed out by the government. So there's no way that Eboli went to Gambino and said, hey, can I have a loan for $4 million? I'm going to use it to buy heroin. So I don't know what he told Gambino the money was for, but he did get the loan. But when his entire crew was arrested very shortly after purchasing all this heroin with this huge sum of money, there really wasn't an excuse as to why he wasn't able to pay back this loan because, again, he had to have lied about why he needed the loan. So now because he lied, he has no reason that he can't pay back the loan. But all the heroin is gone. All of his people got arrested, all the product got seized, and now Eboli is screwed. While we're here at this point in time, let's stop and talk about something super important that happened during this time. I know I haven't talked about it in a while, I know I've talked about it a lot on this channel, but it's been a really long time, so I do have to stop right here and go over this in full right here and now. Because this one thing happening, this one person testifying, is going to cement Gambino's place in history in the Mafia, making one of the 5 families of New York City forever known by his name, the Gambino crime family. And that one thing happening, that one person testifying, is Joseph Valachi. So who is Joseph Valachi? Joseph Valachi, for as famous as he is actually a pretty small-time gangster. He really isn't anybody powerful. But he just pissed off the right people efficiently. And I think that's a perfect summary of Joseph Valachi. While he was in jail, Joseph Valachi wrote a memoir, an autobiography. And in this autobiography, he explains how Vito Genovese gave him the kiss of death. So he's now going through life knowing that he has a number on his head. His time is coming. He's gonna get hit soon. So now, knowing that he's gonna die, he starts to look at things a lot different. So Joseph Valachi is actually very similar to Sammy the Bull Gravano. The only difference is that Joseph Valachi actually went through trial. He was sentenced, and Sammy the Bull didn't even make it that far. So Valachi goes through trial, he gets found guilty, he gets sentenced to a really long jail sentence, gets the kiss of death from Vito Genovese, and he's standing in the prison yard one day, and somebody looks at him sideways. Now, Valachi is super paranoid because, again, he is told, like, I'm gonna have you killed. So Valachi being super paranoid, when this person looked at him sideways, he beat that person to death. And now, instead of a long prison sentence, it's a life prison sentence because now he just caught a murder charge. And I think that that's the point at which he was like, all right, I'm done. I'm doing this long prison sentence because of my work in the Mafia, and the Mafia is gonna turn around and kill me. I'm living like a crazy person, and anytime anybody looks at me sideways, I'm beating them to death. Something has got to give. So Valachi decided to cooperate with the FBI and testify against the Mafia in exchange for a lighter sentence. So lo and behold, Vito Genovese provides the perfect conditions for the first Mafia rat to ever come about. And like, there's nothing new about all this shit, right? But remember, this testimony was given in October of 1963. At this point, J. Edgar Hoover is still denying the existence of the Mafia until 1957 when the Apalachin Meeting took place. Realistically, to the public, this organization is still an infant. And up until this point, nobody had ever taken the stand and laid out everything, the organization of the mafia, who the boss of each of the families is, that the fact that there was 5 families, none of that had ever been laid out in court until Joseph Valachi came along. And Vito Genovese provided the perfect cauldron of shit to make this happen. I feel like Vito Genovese is like a real life superhero villain. Like, that man is so evil and so vile. So yeah, Valachi is not a big time gangster, not super powerful, not super rich. But I think that even the small time dudes in the mafia, they know everything about the mafia. They know the organization, they know the structure, they know who the bosses are. They know that there's 5 families, they know what the ranks are in the mafia. So all of this is stuff that even somebody at the lowest level in the mafia would know. But we as the American public had never learned about any of this. And we learned it for the first time right now when Joseph Valachi takes the stand and testifies to all of it. Valachi also reminds me a lot of Michael Franzese. He has the whole like, oh, I testified and I blew the entire mafia up, but I didn't specifically put anybody in jail. So it's not that bad, guys. Like, yeah, I testified and I let out all the inner workings that up until this point, the mafia had been able to keep a secret. But since nobody went to jail from my testimony, we're all good. And it's like, bro, every person from here on out that gets found guilty of being in this mafia, like, that's on you. Just because you didn't specifically put one single member of the mafia into jail doesn't mean that you didn't deal a crippling blow to the mafia, because you did. And listen, I hate to say this, I really do, but you have to appreciate guys like this, okay? Because if it weren't for guys like that, we would have no idea about any of this. Like, yeah, my family has pretty deep roots in the mafia, but never one time have I sat down with my family member and discussed the inner workings and the rank and file of the mafia. Like, it just doesn't happen. I just know that because I'm able to go on Google and look it up. And without guys like Valachi or Sammy the Bull, that just doesn't exist. We don't know anything about it. Thanks to guys like this, the mafia is not some mythical organization. Because if you think about it, like, think about the Illuminati, right? You could make an argument that the Illuminati is the same kind of thing as the mafia, but nobody's taken the stand to testify against the Illuminati. Nobody's taken the stand and said, oh yeah, there's 5 families of the Illuminati, you know? So the fact that Valachi came out and testified and laid it all out, it took the mafia from a group like the Illuminati, where J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, is saying that this doesn't exist, and it brought it to a point where it's like a regular gang, you know, like the Bloods or the Crips. The mafia, it's well known, it's well established, it's not mythical, it's not secret, it just is. But having said that, that does not mean that I don't view these guys as the absolute bitches that they are for doing all these crimes and not being willing to do the time. Like, if you're out there and you're doing crimes and you're killing people and you're dealing drugs and you're doing this and that, you're probably going to go to jail eventually. So the fact that you're willing to put a whole bunch of other people in jail so that you don't have to go for the crimes that you committed, I don't know. That's just a bitch move to me. So anyways, this big revelation comes out that Valachi's testimony is gonna reveal the inner workings of the mafia and the structure and all of it. It's gonna come out. He stood on the stand and he told the public how there was 5 families in New York and each city outside of New York had their own family. He told the court who the bosses of the families in New York City were at that very moment. Now, he made it very clear that these were not the original bosses of the family. They weren't the first, and they're not going to be the last. But because they were the bosses of the families at the time that Valachi delivered his testimony, the New York City 5 families will always, always, always be known as the families belonging to the guys that were boss at that very moment. So you got Joseph Bonanno, You got Carlo Gambino, Tommy Lucchese, Joseph Colombo, and Vito Genovese. And those are your 5 official New York City families, and those names will carry throughout time, all because of Joseph Apalachin. And the funny thing is, these guys aren't even like the most notable leaders in all of history. There's other better bosses that the family could come to be known as and go throughout all of history with that name. But again, because they were the boss when Joseph Apalachin testified, it'll forever be known as that. Speaking of those 5 bosses, Carlo Gambino had a son named Thomas. We went over all of his kids and when they were born and everything. Well, his son Thomas was unmarried. So Carlo used this as an opportunity, and he married Thomas off to the daughter of Tommy Lucchese. When he did this, Thomas Gambino got his own little FBI number. It was like a father-son bonding experience. Thomas's FBI number was 1667871. Now, Thomas was obviously born famous. Like, Carlo Gambino made a name for himself, and Thomas just was handed his name. But Thomas Gambino was actually pretty dope. I actually kind of like Thomas Gambino. Thomas gave a lot of money to charity, and this is something I never knew. I grew up on Long Island, but I never knew that it was Thomas Gambino that made a $2 million startup fund for Long Island Jewish Medical Center, which is a hospital I've been to 1,000 times. And I've seen the name Gambino and I've thought about it, but I'm like, no way. It has to be a different Gambino. No, it was this family. Thomas Gambino paid $2 million to start that hospital up, and there's a whole wing named after him. Thomas Gambino married Frances Lucchese in 1962, and this was a match made in heaven. But it was a very, like a royal family wedding. It was done to secure business alliances. At the wedding, Carlo Gambino gave Tommy Lucchese, who is Frances Lucchese's father, Carlo gave him a $30,000 present. And because these two were now married, the two families in New York City started working together a lot more closely. And that's how Carlo Gambino got his foot in the door and was able to get a cut of the rackets going on at Idlewood Airport, which is now known as JFK Airport. So if you think about it, if you go down this rabbit hole, and if you think about it, this wedding right here is gonna set the stage for the Lufthansa heist. So I think that's cool. I like putting the puzzle pieces together like that. Thomas Gambino and his brother Joseph, they worked together a lot. They owned a trucking company together named Consolidated Carrier Corporation. The business, which was located on West 35th Street in Manhattan, was so successful that instead of being called a trucking company, it was referred to as a trucking monopoly, which is just so crazy, especially because, as we know, monopolies are illegal in America. But whenever the trucking company was talked about in the media, in newspapers, and whatever, it was always referred to as the trucking monopoly. In 1992, the two brothers, Thomas and Joseph, were hit with a slew of charges. They were charged with enterprise corruption, 52 counts of larceny, extortion, coercion, restraint of trade, and pretty much everything that you would expect to see in a RICO charge. And these two brothers fell in the same way that the rest of the Gambino family fell, at the hands of Sammy the Bull Gravano. After Gravano testified against them, they both ended up taking a plea deal, and it was sweet. It was an amazing deal. They agreed to pay a total of $12 million in restitution, and they were required to sell the trucking monopoly that they had built. And that is sad, okay? They obviously worked really hard to get this company and build it to where it was, but at the end of the day, it could have been so much worse. It was a huge deal. It was a really good deal that they were given. Their original charges put them at risk of getting a 22-year sentence in prison each. So the fact that they just had to pay money and they lost their trucking company, things could have been worse, okay? It really, really could have been worse. So yeah, it sucks. It hurts. That's terrible that they lost their business. But they didn't lose their freedom, and that's what everybody else lost. It's a whole lot less brutal than spending the rest of your life in the prison cell next door to John Gotti. And Gravano put him there too, so it could have been worse. They were really, really lucky. Now, if you haven't been a subscriber for a really long time, you might not know how I feel about Sammy the Bull. It's been a really long time since I've talked about the subject, and I try to stay clear of it because he's on YouTube. Like, he's a content creator. Not that I think that there's a snowball's chance in hell that he would ever see any of my content or see this video, because, like, let's be real here, my channel is a blip on the radar. He's got millions of followers, and I probably won't ever rise to that level. But I really don't like to create friction with other content creators. To be honest, I do my best to avoid talking about anybody that's alive today. I really don't like talking about active mafia members. Most of my content is people that are, well, all of my content is dead people. Like, you'll never see me make an episode about a person that's living right now. That's a lie, because I actually planned on doing videos about Center. But my point is, I don't ever want to put information or put anybody's business out there if that information isn't already publicly searchable and available. I don't want to be out here talking shit about people and starting beefs with mafia dudes. Like, that's just not the way that I want my channel to be portrayed. It's just not. However, I will say that I fully think that Sammy Gravano is a complete hypocrite. He irks me. Like, I was a huge fan of Sammy Gravano when he first got out of prison. Like, I watched all his YouTube videos. I listened along. Like, he's a great storyteller. He really is. And I even got on board with, I can understand why you made the choices that you made. I went the furthest to justify why it was okay to listen to him speak. The deciding factor for me personally came when I saw him. I don't know if it was a short of him talking in person or if it was like a tweet or something. I don't really remember. But I remember that he had come out and he was talking shit about abortion. And now, I have never talked about politics on this channel. I will never talk about politics on this channel. However, for Sammy the Bull Gravano to get online, I don't remember if it was a video or if it was like a typed Facebook post or tweet, whatever. But he got on and said that, like, women are murderers if they have an abortion. Just, like, really nasty shit. And whether I'm pro-choice or pro-life doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is, Sammy the Bull Gravano was found guilty for his role in 19 murders. So let's not throw stones in a glass house, Sammy. That is absolutely ridiculous. And again, I'm not talking about politics. I'm not going there. I won't ever, I never have, I never will. But what I'm not about to do is sit here and listen to somebody that has been found guilty of his role in 19 murders call women that have had an abortion murderers. Like, absolutely not. So that's where I stand on Sammy the Bull. Now, while he was boss of the family, Carlo Gambino pretty much revolutionized what it meant to be a powerful mafioso. He was able to move into territories that the mafia had never even been able to dream about invading. His crime family took almost complete control of the labor unions on the waterfront of both New York and New Jersey, the airports, trucking, construction, the garment industry. They did white-collar scams. Like, money was flowing more than it ever had to the mafia, ever, under Gambino's leadership. And now, although he was heavily involved in crime and the FBI knew it, they came at him constantly. They arrested him for things. They tried to deport him on multiple occasions. They constantly harassed this man, even though the FBI and its agents did everything they could to just destroy this man's life and take him down. FBI agents knew Gambino as somebody that would offer desserts and coffee whenever they would come to the house to issue a search warrant or arrest him to bring him in or just ask questions. He was always very nice and cordial and was never one of those guys that were like screaming at him. He was no Lombardo that was like peeing in coffee and giving it to the FBI. Like, he was a gentleman. He was a man of honor. Gambino made some personnel changes, instituting Neil Dellacroce as his new underboss in 1965. He pushed Joseph Biondo aside, citing that he was old. He was getting older, and he just didn't want him as his underboss anymore. But in reality, Gambino was just sick of Biondo. Biondo ended up getting really tight with the Jersey crew, and he became boys with Sam DeCavalcante. I talked about Joseph Biondo in my episode about Sam DeCavalcante, but pretty much the gist of it was Biondo was the underboss, and he got really tight with Sam DeCavalcante, and he thought that he was going to go to Sam DeCavalcante and start doing business with him and hide it from Gambino so that he didn't have to give Gambino a cut of his earnings. And DeCavalcante is not about that life. Like, DeCavalcante is like, listen, I would like it if somebody told me that this was going on with one of my soldiers. I'm a boss, Gambino's a boss, I'm not gonna screw him. So DeCavalcante told Gambino about it, and instead of whacking Biondo, Gambino was just like, all right, you're not gonna be underboss anymore. We're gonna put Neil Dellacroce in place, and that was really that. So now, remember how I told you before that Thomas Eberle had borrowed $4 million from Carlo Gambino, and he used it to start a drug dealing business. The only problem was that his entire crew was arrested, and all the drugs that they had purchased were confiscated a few days after he made the initial purchase, so he had no way to pay back this loan. Well, Gambino turns around and he sends his new boss, Neil Dellacroce, to go to Eberle and collect on this loan. He's not a new boss by this point. He took over as the underboss in 1965. This all went down in 1972, so it's not new, but new to this story. Now, this is how the lore goes, because there's a lot of dispute over what actually happened here, whether it's true or not, who the actual players are, but we're just going to look at the theories here. According to Mafia lore, Gambino went to collect on the loan, and when Eberle couldn't produce the money, Gambino ordered Eberle to be killed. On July 16, 1972, Thomas Eberle was killed outside of his Gumar's apartment after taking 5 bullets while he sat in the back of his chauffeured car. 2 vehicles, a Ford truck and a 1965 Plymouth, rolled up on this Cadillac that Eberle was sitting in the back of, and the occupants of both cars just unloaded on this Cadillac. It left Eberle with 5 gunshot wounds from 3 different weapons: a .32 caliber pistol, a 7.65 mil, and an M3 machine gun. Now, nobody was ever arrested for this murder, but it was the same kind of situation as Albert Anastasia. Everybody knew that it was Gambino and Genovese that killed Anastasia. Well, everybody thought that they knew that it was Gambino that had Eberle killed. But there was no evidence and nothing that anybody could do about it. Eberle's brother, Patsy, also went missing a few years later. And when I heard that, it made me think about The Sopranos. I wonder if those 2 characters in The Sopranos were written about Eberle and his brother. Remember the twin brothers in The Sopranos, and one of them was killed and the other one was still in the gang, and he kind of went crazy? Wasn't that guy's name Patsy? I'm pretty sure that guy's name was Patsy too. I wonder if that's who it was based. It has to be based on them. I really need to rewatch The Sopranos again. I've seen it like 8,000 times, but I'm due for my 8,001st time. Still to this day, there's a lot of speculation about what happened to Patsy. Some sources say that Carlo Gambino ordered his murder. Other sources say that Carmine Galante ordered his murder because he was a rival drug dealer and Galante just didn't want to deal with him. Other sources say that Patsy is still alive, that an employee of the airport had reported that he boarded a plane headed for South Africa, and he probably went back to Sicily to live the rest of his life. After he went missing a few years after Thomas's death, his whereabouts were never confirmed again. And Patsy was a pretty big deal, too. There's pictures of Patsy sitting with Al Pacino and Al Lettieri, the lead character in The Godfather. So now after Eberle is killed, the story about the loan that he received from Gambino starts to come out, and that, in everybody's mind, is enough motivation for Gambino to kill him. Differing reports started circulating that Gambino actually didn't really even care about the loan. He just wanted to kill Thomas Eberle because he wanted to put Frank Funzi Thierry in place as the boss of the family. He wanted another vote on the commission, so it was just easier to get rid of Evely. There was a lot of theories that it wasn't even Gambino or Carmine Galante that actually did it. Carlo Gambino was just the guy that the FBI threw it on, and that it was actually Lombardo who killed him. Other theories say that he was killed because of the movie The Godfather, so it's really a mystery. Nobody knows, and I don't think anybody ever will. So I'm gonna end the video here. This is already a really long episode, and I don't want to keep going and just pile more on, so we're gonna end it here. Don't forget to tune in next week for the next and final episode, Part 4 of Carlo Gambino. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow, comment, do all the things, and I'll see you next week. Bye!